And into video 2, looking at text. So we just created a solid, our first layer within a composition 2, or chapter 2, the last video. And actually, the one thing I didn't mention last time, which was pretty cool, when you create solids and some different things, they'll actually create a folder for you to organize. So it's a pretty nice feature, so you can always find your solids within your project panel. But we're going to look at creating text. And I'm actually already in a text workspace, so you can change back to standard, and um, sometimes it just depends. I think the way I set up my text I really didn't like, so I'm just going to go back to this standard workspace environment and bring this up and open a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and create our text. Now there's different ways to do this, and if you're down here you can right click like I showed you before, create text. You can come up here to layer, again come over here, and it's going to have that Control Alt Shift plus T, which is quite a bit to remember for a shortcut. But if you're in your composition panel, something really cool, just pushing Control T, it's going to select your tool, the text tool, and then all you have to do is select on your composition, and I can start writing text. So easy enough. I've already created our text. It shows up down here in our timeline, and we're ready to go. Now, some things about text to know: you can use text for all sorts of different things. You can animate tiles, lower thirds, credit rolls, for maybe movies, dynamic typography. The one thing that is really cool that you can manipulate and do a lot with text. So we're going to look at text a little bit differently. And before we move in, kind of talking about things that with are in text, I'm going to show you something cool within our timeline very briefly, because we're going to look at it when we start to animate. So I'm going to bring this up just a little bit bigger. But we've got our text over here, and we're able to click on this icon to say, hey, what's underneath there? And it's going to give us different options. We've got our text, which we'll look at in a little bit, where we can animate. That's a little bit more advanced later on in chapter 2. But down here in transform, we've got all these different variations of properties that we can manipulate. And in our next few videos, we're going to really start to look at how to animate using just these few different properties. Now, before we do that, since animation of anchor points and scale and position, rotation, all those opacity, even color, can, I don't want to say get confusing, but definitely knowing from scratch of how to create is going to help you, and especially before we getting to animate our text with animators and our selectors and 3D text. But I want to talk about text itself. Now, text within After Effects is a synthetic layer, and what I mean by that is that the text layer does not use a footage item as its source. Like when you import a file, you're going to have that reference link back to a source file. The synthetic text that you're creating it, just in After Effects. Now you can, with other things, you can use source files from maybe, that you can create into text layers from Photoshop and Illustrator. But really, when you create text within After Effects, it's just a synthetic layer. And something also cool about with After Effects is their text layers are simply vector layers. And what I mean by that is they're going to be continuously rasterized, and that word might be new to you, but being rasterized means no matter how I scale, it's going to stay, crisp and sharp and look very, very good within its resolution. So it's by itself. So now, we've talked about text. Now I'm going to go over to and show you just kind of some things. So since we created this text and it's just very generic, I could change it because I have to deal with UD graphics a lot. I'm already in a font that is for marketing and branding, one that we have to use as Champion. But I can, if I wanted to, again, like I said, I can change different fonts. I can change colors. I can change things like this. If I wanted to change the scale, I could do so right here instead of doing it over within our timeline. I can also, if I wanted to, we have different things over this way, if maybe kerning wise. Let me go over here. I could stretch it out. So if I maybe wanted something in between. And you have different variations with this. If I wanted to vertically stretch it, okay, and this is not going to be proportional to aspects, but I could do that with just the vertical or even horizontal. Um, Later on, if you maybe wanted to kind of set the baseline shift so you have like text high, one letter higher, one lower, so it's almost like subscript, and using that with the same, you have these down here. You can kind of the faux bold, so you can make it bold if you want, or italic, and they're calling it the faux because it's kind of fake if your font maybe doesn't have that. All caps, lower tech, small caps. Um, Now, if I had a word next to it, and again right here, if I scroll over that again, it's saying the superscript and subscript. So again, you got those options to choose, which is really cool. So you'll definitely want to play around with that. Now, something I also look at is this is called point text. So point text, which means it's just an individual line. And with that, one thing sometimes people will try to do is when you're in text and you want to go back to maybe your selection tool, you've got to be able to get out of your text. And by doing that, if you're most of the time when you're done typing, you can hit enter. It'll bring out that way so I can get to V, meaning shortcut for selection tool. But also sometimes you might have to hold the control and hit enter to get out of your text to go back to V. Now, looking at my text, I can move it around within the space on the composition. But I might want to create what's called paragraph text, which is a box set, so I can create maybe more of a paragraph style than just an individual line. Now, by doing that, you might go, okay, how do I do that? Okay, and I can right click and I bring up all these options, and that's not what I want. But you need to make sure that you have your layer selected and that you have your tool, your text tool selected, and when you right click, it's going to bring up this option to convert to paragraph text. And when I do that, I can now go in here, and when I start to type, depending on the space of the box surrounding your text, will say, okay, this is what you can type in. So I could keep saying text to create more words, okay, and you're like, oh no, where'd all that words? Yes, I was typing, but what I have to do is now I have to just stretch that box out to see that I was typing, and I was not doing any spaces in between for the first, so I'd actually have to do that. But I can manipulate that paragraph to be what I want it to be within that. So that's one thing I can do. And if I go back, let me actually grab my text tool, and we're going to right click back here. I can convert to point text once again, and I've got now this jumbled mess because they put all those words on one line. So I'm just going to go back and create, let's go ahead and delete all that and create text. Okay, so I want to show you a few more things within creating text. So I've got my text, and I'm going to go down here and select my text, and maybe I want to align it. And I could do this really, go like try to maybe open up my title safe action tool and go, okay, it's in the middle, and create guides and things like that. And I hope you're not doing that because that's just going to take too long. But one thing you might want to do is with your align panel, which again you can find up here if it's not selected under window, select line. But they give you options. So within the horizontal, I could say, hey, I want to center it. Okay, so it centers it horizontally, and you can say, hey, vertically center. So now I know that's perfectly centered within my composition panel, which is perfect. Now I can go and work and maybe do some other things. Now, something else that people look at, and I'm going to go ahead and close this title action safe. I don't like really looking at that. If I select my text and come up here, I can change, and again, I'm looking at, changing things just within the composition panel and using panels before we get into looking at our transforming of our actual properties within timeline. But I can take these, our labels right here are the boxes, and I can change text by doing that as well. So if I wanted to, I can manipulate, and depending on which one I'm grabbing, let's go ahead and Control Z that, undo, might play around with how I'm changing my text size. Now, if I grab this middle one, it's only going to do the horizontal. I can't, no matter even if I bring my mouse up and down, it's only going to stay horizontal. Same with this one. If I go this way, doesn't matter, it's only going to grab it. It's these outside ones that are going to make the change. Now, you're probably noticing, okay, I'm able to change the size, and it might not stay proportional. One way to do that is to grab one of those boxes, and hit shift, and now as I drag, it's going to stay proportional, okay? But you got to make sure that you grab one of the boxes before, because if I hit shift and then grab this box, it's going to click out and deselect my text layer. Now, something else, so since I'm working on this side, and if I grab this side, you're going to notice that it does something really funky. You're probably like, what's going on? The reason it does that, it depends on where your anchor point is. And right now, I notice that my anchor point for my text is all the way down here. Now, we're going to look at using a tool again before that we talked about up here, which is your pan behind tool. And one thing I can do is now I can bring this and say, hey, I want to make this text right here, and I've done so. And I'm going to show you some cool other things later on, little tricks But we're going to go from there. The last thing I really want to talk about is just your workspace. Again, making sure that you understand that you can change your workspace. You can set up that if you know that you're going to be working a certain way, and again, like I said, I did this a little bit different last time, but I have my align, character, paragraph all in one kind of jumbled up panel right here. So, but you can change and manipulate your text so you can go right to that. But I'm going to go back to standard. And that's kind of where we're going to end within just understanding really quick how to create a text layer. And we're going to go on from here, starting to animate and transform it.